Hello, everyone. So we are right back with our next presenter, who is Matt Walz, who is working as a Chief Executive Officer at Trialbee. And Matt will be sharing his the topic of the presentation, in which he will be explaining 5 strategies. He will be sharing the different avenues of his presentation of digital transformation and eClinical. And within few minutes, he will be having the stage. Thank you so much. And now, Matt, the stage is all yours. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohsen. Hello, everybody. As Mohsen mentioned, my name is Matt Walz, and we're going to talk today about 5 smart strategies to transform patient enrollment for your studies. I'm really happy to be speaking to you today. I figured I'd start with a little bit about who I am. So I'm currently the CEO of Trialbee. And if you kind of work through, I have a little timeline here. I am a software engineer by trade. So my career kind of began at Microsoft. And there I got introduced to large pharmaceutical companies who were looking to use Microsoft technology to do better collaborations with investigative sites. And I really fell in love for life sciences and the intersection of life sciences and technologies when I was at Microsoft. So after doing that for a while, I decided to leave and started a company called NextDocs. That company was focused on regulated content management. So think about SOP management and regulatory document management. And there at NextDocs, we released the first commercial software product for eTMF, electronic trial master file. And then later we released an EISF, an investigator site file as well. NextDocs eventually sold to Aurea. And so with that acquisition of the company, I spent some time at Aurea and was the general manager for their life sciences business. And I did that for a few years. And then just last year joined Trialbee as CEO, which is another venture-backed company where we're looking to reimagine patient matching and enrollment. My passion in life is really to identify problems in life sciences that are either very costly or very disruptive to getting drugs and devices out to market, and then see if there's a way to build out the right capabilities and innovations to solve those problems. So that's what really excites me and gets me up out of bed every day. So hopefully that's a little bit about me. We're gonna jump into our topic today. And I want to start by talking about kind of what patient enrollment looks like from my perspective. And hopefully you share some of these views. I look at a lot of data all the time, and a lot of the premise for what we do at Trialbee is based on analyzing data. And so I've kind of broken this up into 3 stages. The first is looking at clinical trials before the pandemic hit. And I think, and specifically around patient enrollment. And as many of you know, we weren't in the greatest spot with patient enrollment before the pandemic. There's a number of really famous statistics here. So one of them is that 80% of clinical trials are delayed due to failure to meet enrollment timelines. Another stat, and I'm sure there's plenty here that we could put, I just chose a few, that 3% of oncology patients are even aware of clinical trials, even though surveys indicate that 75% would participate if they could. And then that 50% of sites end up enrolling 1 or 0 patients on their own. So that was the scenario for patient enrollment before the pandemic hit. And then we had the pandemic, and of course it took a lot worse of a turn. So a few stats here. Between January 1st and May 1st of last year, 6,000 trials were completely stopped across 200 different companies. If you look at the drop in patient enrollment as those trials began to come back online, it was really bad. So in April, it was around 70% less enrolled patients were joining new studies. In June, got a little bit better. We were down 30%. By August, we were down 20%. And I would argue that where we sit right now coming into 2021, we're actually in a fairly decent spot. From everything that we can tell in our data and our business models, patient enrollment is gotten on par with where it was prior to the pandemic, at least in terms of new studies starting and enrollment goals. But as we see over here in the pre-pandemic world, that's not a great situation to be in. And it's becoming more difficult to find patients. One of the other stats here is that 1/3 of all non-elderly adult population are completely forgoing their healthcare right now. So a lot of people are not going to their normal doctor visits because they're afraid of getting COVID. So they're staying home. So even though the trials are returning and we have the demand for patient enrollment returning, and in some regards, enrollment levels are starting to get back to where they were before the pandemic, which wasn't a great spot, we still have 1/3 of people who aren't going to their regular healthcare provider and are not learning about or finding out about the trials that they can participate in. So here we are. This should say February 2021. I apologize for that. So here we are in February, basically a year after the pandemic hit. And this survey is very fresh. It just came out last month from Pharma Intelligence. And they asked 252 companies, what is the number one impacted part of your clinical trial from the pandemic? And 49%, the number one answer was longer enrollment times. And so the point of today's presentation is to try and give you some strategies that can help you have a more successful enrollment timeline. The other thing I'll add, in addition to the data behind enrollees and statistics around clinical trial enrollment, is that coming out of the pandemic, and of course we're not out of it yet, but we're starting to with the vaccines being made more widely available, the whole landscape for how we do a clinical trial has shifted. And there's a number of factors that are playing a role here. The first is, and this was really started last year, this concept of being more patient-centric with our clinical trials. And here the goal is to have a better relationship with the patient, to be more empathetic for the patient, to think through the patient's journey of accessing clinical research. And again, everything I talk about is going to be focused in on clinical research, not life sciences as a whole. And the need to have more patient-centric strategies. This is a big shift that's happening. Another one is, and of course everyone in clinical trials is aware of DCTs, the rise of decentralized clinical trials. The tool sets around running decentralized clinical trials is largely what enabled a lot of trials to restart quickly when the pandemic first hit. And now it's becoming a major theme in all trial planning. How much of the trial can we actually run in a decentralized manner, or having virtual visits and virtual telehealth? So you have the decentralized clinical trial theme. And then the final theme we're seeing is diversity. And interestingly enough, this was really brought to light pretty heavily by COVID and has become even more important since the pandemic. So sadly, it took a pandemic to make us really put a focus on this, but we are finally really starting to focus in on diversity. And in fact, I just pulled, this morning I was searching the news, I just found this article in my headlines, and it was from ABC News, and it was looking at COVID data. You know, in the US, we just now surpassed, sadly, half a million lives lost to COVID. And so this data is looking at the disparity of hospital visits and death rates among different population groups or demographics. And as you can see, if you just look at one of these, the African American, you can see here that they're 3 times more likely to end up in the hospital and 2 times more likely to die from COVID. And this is the data that has come out during the pandemic that has really brought diversity front and foremost. When we're running clinical trials and we have a cohort of patients in that clinical trial, the diversity mix needs to be more representative of the patient population that ultimately will use the drug or device. And in this case, COVID really brought this to light. And I bring up this slide about the transformative shifts that are happening because, you know, the last slide is really about the baseline of, hey, patient enrollment wasn't in great shape before COVID. The pandemic hurt it a lot. And now we're starting to spin trials back up, and we really need to think harder about the way that we reach out to the patient. And so that was to level set the data of kind of looking at patient enrollment historically and where we're at today. This slide is really about the new world that we wake up in as we come and we begin to restart trials and we begin to restart enrollment campaigns and plan for them. It really is a new world in terms of these shifts, being more patient-centric, incorporating decentralized clinical trial designs into our study, and looking at the diversity makeup of the patients that we enroll in the study. And so I'm hoping that through some simple strategies that we're finding to be very effective in our experience with matching and enrolling patients, that you'll walk out of the session today with 5 smart strategies to transform patient enrollment for your study. And again, this is really based on our experience. We deal with a lot of sponsors, a lot of CROs, a lot of studies. We're constantly enrolling and learning and looking at data. And so hopefully you find this insightful. The first strategy is pretty basic, and it goes back to some of the data I was showing on the earlier slides. Be realistic with your enrollment timelines. We weren't that great at predicting them before the pandemic. It's even more important now to take a look at enrollment timelines. And 3 practical steps here. 1, you can build and report on feasibility using real-world data. And there's some examples over here to the right with medical records and claims data. But the goal is to really spend time in feasibility. Challenge timeline models that are built from pre-pandemic data. They're not going to be as relevant. Or if you have a timeline model that's pre-pandemic, don't think you're going to exceed that for sure. And as we look at where we're at today in enrolling patients. And the final category is if you use vendors to assist you with patient matching and enrollment, ask them for their analysis of the data. I can tell you firsthand from being inside of one of these companies, when we go and we look at an enrollment campaign where we have to match and enroll patients, we crunch through a ton of data. And we don't always get asked to provide it. So we don't always think to provide it, but we have to use that data to analyze our own spend and to analyze our own timelines. And should this be a project that we take on? And I'll give you just a quick example. Recently, we were asked to run a match and enroll campaign for a new baby formula. And so if you think about the baby formula market, right, it's a point in time matching because it has to be a mother who is about to give birth, who's willing to try a new formula. So it's a point in time enrollment study. And then secondly, they wanted to run for 2 months and they wanted to find 160 mothers willing to try a new formula on their child. And this was a US centric study across a defined number of states. I believe if you look at it as 7 states, right? And so we start with the numbers. When we look at this internally and we're asked to bid, it's not a guessing game. We dig into the data. So here we have March and April birth rates from CDC data from a prior year. And we look at that, and here we get some totals in the 2 months that they wanted to run the study. So as you can see, this is very current data because this is a campaign that was going to kick off in March. We take out of that multiples and preterms because they would not necessarily be good candidates for this study. And then you take away the fact that only 20% of mothers are formula feeding. And here's the population you actually have an opportunity to reach. These are, in case I was not clear, these are monthly births. So this is the number of births in a month in the particular states, taking away from that multiples and preterms, and then only focusing in on formula fed, which is about 20%. So we had a total addressable population for 2 months in 7 states of 46,000 mothers. Then we dig into what it looks like to run a campaign and our historical numbers and conversion rates of being able to reach patients. And so here, there's a lot of text, but I'll just say here you can have, if we reach out to that population in those states, we can through digital media efforts, we can guarantee to attract 60 to 70,000 people to read more. Of that, we'll end up with 120 to 180 who will complete pre-screening and be eligible. This is the screening questions they take themselves. Out of that 120 to 180 who pre-screen themselves, there'll be a further drop off and we'll end up with 60 to 90 who get enrolled in 2 months. Now remember, the sponsor's original goal was 160 for 2 months. And here, based on our data, we can see it's 60 to 90. So what is our recommendation? Our recommendation is you probably have to run this for 2 more months. And in fact, that's what it was. But this is the type of data that your vendors will have. And if you're not asking for it, they don't think to give it to you all the time. So as you're planning your enrollment timeline, not only be more realistic, but if you're using vendors, ask them for their source data. let them see what they're looking at, and so that you can have more of a reality check on what your goals are. Another component of this was competitive studies. So if you look at the states, California, Texas, Florida, and there was some others, but these are the highly contentious ones. There's multiple new infant formula studies that they were competing with in those exact same states. I mean, Florida and Texas had 7 existing new formula campaigns running. So this is another aspect of data that your vendors usually have access to and use as part of their modeling. Okay, so strategy number 1, be more realistic with timelines. Strategy number 2, in today's world, we have to go direct to patient awareness. The days of relying on sites to find and bring their own patients, which will always be an important part of the strategy, it's not going to get you to the finish line on your enrollment goals, though. You have to have a strategy for reaching the patient directly. There's lots of ways to do that. There's working through community support groups. And then there's, where are the patients spending their time? And as be no surprise to everybody, a lot of patients are spending their time online right now. And so you can, through placing smart ads where patients are, geo-fenced based on zip codes or regions where those patients exist, and you know from the data there's higher concentrations, or where patients are closer to a site. You can pick the common channels that they're probably participating in, and you can put digital outreach in front of them through a smart digital presence. Bring them to a landing page and ask them to pre-qualify. And here you're passing good referred patients to your site to evaluate. And in the end, hopefully have enrolled patients. So direct to patient awareness would be a second strategy. Make sure that in your enrollment plan, you're thinking through a direct to patient strategy, however that is. And in this case, this is a lot part of our business model, but we see a high success rate with doing the smart digital presence. A couple don'ts if you employ this. Don't wait until your study is in rescue mode to implement new strategies. Include them in the planning process up front. We get pulled into a ton of rescue studies to turn timelines around. And it's never an ideal position for us because the moment we're engaged, we still have to go through IRB approval on materials, which already sets you up for a month or 2 delay just to get to the point where you're starting to reach the patient. So really don't wait until you're in rescue mode. Don't use overly scientific terms on your study landing page and the materials that describe. Because you're reaching out to a broader audience, you want to make it very simple for them to consume and understand how the study could help them. And then finally, if a patient is ineligible for the study, don't leave them in the dark. If there's a way to refer them to other studies, if there's a way to refer them to a future point in time, a relationship with you, take that step with them. Don't just disqualify them and leave them in the dark. It creates a better patient relationship. All right, strategy 3, and we're going to start with a diagram here that looks a lot like the prior diagram. Pass better qualified referrals to your sites. So this is exactly as what you saw before. The only thing is I'm going to hammer in right here, okay? And I'm going to replace that with a nurse interview qualification. You can, in your enrollment process, after a patient pre-screens, you can involve a nurse to better qualify them to the protocol. The advantage here is that you're passing your site a better qualified referral. Why is that good? Well, and that goes to strategy number 4. Your whole goal should be to reduce site burden. In today's pandemic world, the sites are overwhelmed more than ever with healthcare needs. Anything that we can do to reduce their burden will ensure better processing of patients at the site. So one of them would be a better qualified referral. If there's something you can bake into your enrollment process that better qualifies a patient beyond just a self-screener, we highly recommend that. And in fact, we use that in our business model for nearly every study. Second, now this is better in the US than in Europe, but I would assume most companies are running global studies these days. Medical record retrieval. There are providers out there through an online mechanism can help a patient retrieve their medical record. If there's a way to have a patient with their medical record prior to going to the site, you have a more study-ready patient, and you took another delay process out of the site onboarding of that patient. Third, help with scheduling. There's multiple ways to do this. You could do a warm handoff where you're warmly calling up the site and moving the patient over. You can do indirect scheduling where the sites block off a certain day and time of the week, and you know that you can schedule patients for their visits during that day and time. And then if you want to get more complex and there's a way to do integrations and do direct scheduling with sites. But regardless, if there's a way to help with scheduling, think that through as part of your enrollment planning. And strategy 5, implement EConsent, teleconsent as part of your enrollment flow. Why? It's a more patient-friendly experience. It further reduces the burden on the site, which we already spoke about. It reduces a big place of drop-off, which is from referral to consent. You can shorten that timeline with EConsent or teleconsent tools and consent that patient quicker. You'll have a more optimized engagement experience and less dropout rates from patients who are interested in the study. And then the third point, going back to our original kind of transformations happening in the space, this aligns really well with decentralized clinical trials. So your study is very well set up to work with virtual sites. And I put in one bonus here. And this is one that I personally and we at Trialbee strongly believe in. Use data and analytics to drive all the performance. Measure everything you can. Set alerts for key events. Like if you've referred a patient and it's been 24 or 48 hours and the site is not followed up, have an alert that goes out and have somebody reach out to that site. That's a great place where patients will drop off if they're not contacted quickly. Benchmarks will also be useful in determining your next study enrollment timeline. So if you're tracking good data during this enrollment, you'll have good data in your future study planning. Another good piece to measure if you're doing direct to patient is what channels are reaching the patient the best. Is it through Facebook channels? Is it through Google channels? Is it through XYZ channels? And having good data and analytics around what channels are driving the right patient behaviors that end up in enrollment will really help you target your spend more the next time you go or adapt it as you go through your enrollment. Here's an example of some real-time metrics you can look at. So smarting with the digital outreach and the pre-screener and the nurse referral up to the site performance of being processed. This is the type of data we look at every step of the way. You should know how many patients you have waiting, how long they've been waiting, who's dropped off and potentially why, who's been disqualified and potentially why, and then what channels are feeding those patients, so that you can learn who's getting enrolled at the end and come back around and readapt your outreach strategy. All right, I'm about out of time, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much for letting me present to you today. I hope it was a worthwhile presentation with good insights.
So thank you so much, Matt, for such a wonderful presentation. And the thing is this, that the time that you have given to us, it's an honor for our organization that you have given time and for such a wonderful presentation. There's some questions which people want to ask from you regarding your presentation. So kindly tell me about how these strategies will be changed in the post-COVID scenario, if you can.
Yeah, I actually believe a lot of them will not be changed in the post-COVID scenario. I think that was the reason I put up the transformation shifts. I think diversity is sticking around. I think decentralized and virtual trials is sticking around and having a more patient-centric view. I believe they're all sticking around as we emerge from the pandemic and going forward. I don't think you're going to see them back off because unfortunately the pandemic brought a lot of innovation, but I believe it's here to stay. So I don't believe they'll change that much. And maybe it didn't come across, but that was kind of the goal, was to prepare for where we're going to land when we get out of the pandemic. Good question.
Okay. So just one thing, describe the timeline models in the pre-pandemic situation, if you can explain something.
The time frame models?
Exactly.
Okay. That's a tricky question because a lot of times it depends on the specific indication or disease, what a time frame model looks like. But traditionally, the way that it's been looked at is how many patients do I need at the end? And then you start to model backwards. How many do I usually get through this channel? How many drop off along the way to result in a more narrowed scope of patients that actually get enrolled? And that kind of gives you an outreach strategy. That's been the model traditionally. I call it a top-down model because you look at this big, broad audience and you're trying to get down to a certain number at the end based on known dropout rates. But it's always different based on indication and disease. I believe one of the ways that model will change is we'll start looking more at what is the diverse makeup of the cohort at the end and what channels drive a greater diversity makeup. And I think that'll be incorporated in models as we move forward. That's my opinion.
Okay. Thank you so much, Matt, for answering this questions, and thank you so much for your time. Now, with this presentation of Matt Walz, we will be going to end our second annual Digital Transformation Lockdown and E-Clinical Service Conference. So thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you so much for all my speaker lineup who has given us such a phenomenal presentations. And last but not the least, I would like to mention the name of my sponsor partners. Without them, this conference would not have been possible. And the names are thank you so much to Patch AI, Locawind, then Astalis, Trialbee, and Pelios. Thank you so much for collaborating with us and for partnering and to make this conference such a huge success. Thank you so much. So we will be right back with much more conferences. Follow us on our event website. Thank you.